What if the person you feared the most was the one sent to save you? What if the sound that woke you at 2 a.m. wasn't danger, but destiny knocking on your door? This is the story of a 72-year-old widow who opened her door one freezing night to a tattooed biker and his dying son, and in doing so, reopened the door to her own heart. It's not about crime, or gangs, or miracles. It's about human mercy, the kind that doesn't wear a badge or a title, the kind that makes strangers into family and turns fear into faith. In a world where headlines divide and kindness feels outdated, this story dares to ask one simple question. What would you do if the knock came to your door? Would you turn off the light or turn the handle? Because that one choice, a single act of compassion from a woman who had nothing left to give, sparked a chain reaction that reached across a town, rebuilt broken men, and reminded everyone that the loudest heroes aren't the ones on TV. They're the ones who still believe in opening their doors. Stay with us, because this isn't just another emotional story. This is a true-to-life reflection of courage, forgiveness, and second chances, crafted in the spirit of Undercover Boss, Undercover CEO, and celebrity undercover stories. Every line you hear, every image you see, is built to remind you that humanity still exists. In kitchens, in shelters, in small towns, where hearts still beat louder than judgment. So lean in, keep your volume up, and remember, sometimes the biggest miracles begin with a single knock. They say every miracle begins with a sound you almost ignore. For Clara Jefferson, it began with a knock. A slow, hollow, trembling knock that split the silence of a frozen Wisconsin night. The clock read 2:03 a.m. Outside, the world was locked in white. Snowflakes danced like shards of glass in the wind, slamming against her windows. The old farmhouse groaned under the storm, its wooden beams creaking as if whispering, "Don't open that door." But loneliness makes you hear things differently. Clara had lived alone for 7 winters since her husband Harold passed. Her house, once filled with music and laughter, now spoke only in sighs and the low hum of the refrigerator. That night, even the hum had gone silent. The power had failed hours ago. Wrapped in 2 blankets, she sat by a flickering candle, the flame bending every time the wind howled through the cracks. Her bones ached from the cold. She had just whispered her nightly prayer, a habit she never abandoned, when that sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slower this time, heavier, desperate. She froze. Who would come to an old woman's door at this hour, in this storm? Her mind rushed through possibilities. A thief? A drunk? A coyote caught in her trash again? Her neighborhood, Maple Haven, wasn't dangerous. But it wasn't the kind of place where strangers ask for help after midnight either. The knocking grew louder, urgent now. And then, a voice, rough, breaking, shouted through the wind. "Ma'am, please, please, I need help." Clara's candle flickered wildly. She clenched the blanket tighter. There was something in that voice. A weight, a crack, something human and terrified. Her heart thumped hard, echoing through her chest like the old church bell she used to ring every Sunday. She reached for her phone. No signal. The lines were dead. Just her, the storm, and the voice of a stranger begging outside her door. Clara took a shaky breath and crept toward the front hallway. Each step groaned beneath her slippers. The knocking stopped, replaced by silence. And then, the faintest sound of crying. She pressed her eye to the peephole. The porch light, half buried under snow, cast a dim golden circle. In it stood a man, huge, drenched, his jacket glistening with frost. Across his shoulders, a black leather vest, a skull, and wings stitched across the back. Iron Vultures MC. Her breath caught. She had seen that name once on the evening news. A biker club, the kind that rolled through towns, loud and intimidating, like thunder in denim. The man's head hung low, and in his arms, something small, wrapped in an old towel, motionless. Clara squinted. The man lifted the bundle slightly, revealing a child's face. Pale, lips blue, hair matted with melting snow. "Dear Lord," she whispered. Her hand trembled against the doorframe. The man looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, pleading. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice hoarse from the cold. "My boy, he's freezing. We've been out here all night. Please, ma'am, please." Her instincts screamed no, but her heart, that stubborn, loyal thing, whispered something else. She thought of her own son, Marcus, gone somewhere out there in the world, lost to choices she couldn't fix. What if it were him, standing on someone else's porch, holding his child, begging for mercy? She turned away, shaking her head, pacing the narrow hallway. "This is madness," she murmured to herself. "He could be dangerous. I'm 72 years old, for heaven's sake." But her eyes drifted back to the small face, that child's lifeless stillness, and she felt something tear open inside her chest. She pulled the chain lock free. Her fingers hesitated on the knob. The wind screamed again, as if warning her. Still, she whispered, "Lord, if I'm wrong, forgive me." And then she opened the door. The storm burst inside like a living thing. Snow, wind, cold air slicing across her skin. The man stumbled forward, collapsing to his knees, clutching the child. The boy's eyes fluttered once, barely. "Get in!" Clara shouted over the wind. "Now!" She shut the door with her whole weight, sealing the cold outside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of her old clock ticking and the rasp of the man's breathing. He looked up at her, water dripping from his beard. "I'm Cole," he said between gasps. "Cole Bannon. This is my son, Eli." Clara nodded, still catching her breath. "The fire's out, but we'll fix that. Give me the boy." Her nurse instincts, buried for years, snapped back to life. She laid the child on her couch, wrapping him in blankets, rubbing his small hands. Cole collapsed beside them, whispering prayers under his breath. Outside, the wind shrieked. Inside, the faint sound of a child's breath returned, weak, but real. Clara exhaled a tremor of relief. The stranger lifted his head, tears freezing on his cheeks. You saved him," he whispered. She shook her head gently. "No," she said, voice soft but steady. "God did. I just opened the door." The candle flickered once, then steadied, glowing warm across their faces. And for the first time in 7 winters, Clara's house felt alive again. But somewhere deep in her chest, she knew this night wasn't over. The knock at 2 a.m. was just the beginning. The house was silent, except for the storm's howl beyond the windows. Snow pressed against the glass like ghostly hands, and every gust made the shutters rattle. Clara Jefferson stood in the dim yellow glow of a single candle, staring at the man and the little boy she had just dragged back from death's doorstep. The child, Eli Bannon, was barely breathing. His lips trembled, skin ashen. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Beside him, the father, Cole, knelt, soaked and trembling, his broad shoulders shaking as he tried to keep the boy warm with his own body heat. Clara's voice broke the stillness. "Take off his jacket. Quickly, we have to get him dry." Cole obeyed instantly, stripping the frozen leather from the boy's small frame. His fingers were stiff, cut and bleeding from the cold. Clara grabbed every blanket she could find, the quilt her mother sewed before the war, her late husband's wool coat, even the shawl from her church bag. She piled them on the couch, wrapping Eli in layers like fragile glass. "Do you have a fireplace?" Cole asked, voice hoarse. "Out of wood," she replied, "but I've got gas for the stove. It's enough." She guided him into the small kitchen, where the faint blue flame hissed to life beneath a pot of water. Steam rose, a blessing in the bitter air. Cole stood motionless for a moment, watching her. This tiny woman in a nightgown and thick socks, moving like a soldier in a battlefield of blankets and towels. "You a nurse or something?" he asked softly. Clara didn't look up. "Once, a long time ago." She returned to the living room, pressing a warm cloth against Eli's forehead. "His temperature's low," she murmured. "If he slips any further, we could lose him." Cole dropped to his knees again, clutching his son's small hand. "Don't you leave me, buddy," he whispered. "You hang on. Daddy's right here." It was raw, pure, the kind of love that burned through fear. Clara felt something tighten in her chest, that ache that only mothers understand. She remembered Marcus, her son, when he was about Eli's age, running barefoot through the kitchen, laughing until milk spilled everywhere. Then she remembered the day he left, yelling things that could never be unsaid. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard and focused on the boy. "Help me hold him," she said firmly. They worked together in silence, two strangers bound by desperation. Clara wrapped hot towels around the boy's legs and feet. Cole rubbed his hands, whispering prayers between breaths. At one point, Eli shivered violently, and Clara pressed a trembling hand to his chest. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Breathe for your daddy. Just breathe." Minutes passed like hours, and then a sound. A weak cough, followed by another. Cole froze. His eyes widened. "Eli?" The boy's tiny fingers twitched. Another cough. Then a faint, pitiful cry. Clara exhaled, half relief, half disbelief. Cole buried his face in his hands, tears spilling between his fingers. He kissed the boy's forehead again and again, whispering, "Thank you, God. Thank you." Clara smiled, exhausted. "He's not out of danger yet," she said gently. "But he's fighting." The room grew warmer, or maybe it only felt that way. The candle flame danced brighter now, reflecting off the melted puddles of snow on the floor. For the first time, Clara looked at Cole. Really looked. The tattoos across his arms weren't sinister. They were names, dates, symbols of loss and loyalty. Across his wrist, Ruth, forever. His wife, perhaps. His hair was long, tangled, and streaked with frost, but his eyes, pale blue and weary, carried no violence, only gratitude. He noticed her staring and managed a small, broken laugh. "You probably think I'm some kind of monster," he said. Clara shook her head slowly. "I think you're a father who didn't give up." He looked down, ashamed. "I almost did," he whispered. "I buried my wife last spring. Cancer. Everything fell apart after that. I lost the apartment, the job. The bike was all I had left. We've been sleeping in motels until I ran out of money. I just..." Wanted to get Eli to his aunt's before the storm hit. Clara's throat tightened. You've been out there all night? He nodded. Every house I stopped at, they slammed the door. One guy even pointed a shotgun. Then I saw your light. He looked at her as if he couldn't quite believe she existed. You're the only one who opened the door. Clara stared at the small boy breathing against her chest. Her fingers brushed his curls gently. I didn't open it for you, she said, half smiling. I opened it for him. Cole nodded slowly. Still, thank you. You saved us both. Outside, the storm screamed like it was trying to erase everything in sight. But inside that little living room, the world had already changed. A widow and a broken father. A sick child and a candlelight promise. Clara brought the steaming bowl of soup from the kitchen and handed it to Cole. Eat, she said. You'll need your strength. He hesitated. What about you? I'll eat later, she replied. You first. You've been carrying the world on your shoulders. Cole's lips trembled. I don't deserve this kindness. Clara smiled faintly. Most people don't. That's what makes it kindness. He looked down at his son, sleeping now, his chest rising and falling like a fragile heartbeat. The man closed his eyes and whispered, If I die tomorrow, I'll still thank God for tonight. Clara said nothing. She just pulled another blanket around the child and turned off the lamp. The storm outside began to fade, its rage softening into distant wind. But deep down, Clara felt something stirring, something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. And yet, she knew this was only the calm before something much larger. Because kindness, once shown, never goes unnoticed. Not in a town like Maple Haven. And not when the past has a way of finding you. Morning crept into Maple Haven like a quiet apology. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world made of silver. Every roof, every fence, every tree branch bowed under the weight of snow, glittering in the pale sunrise. Inside the little farmhouse, the first beams of light found Clara Jefferson asleep in a chair, her head tilted, hands folded in her lap. Across from her, Cole Bannon stirred awake on the couch, still wrapped in one of her old quilts. His son, Eli, lay beside him, breathing steady, cheeks now faintly pink instead of ghostly white. The world looked different now, safer, softer, as if the house itself had decided to protect them. Cole blinked, disoriented. The warmth, the smell of coffee, the ticking of an old wall clock. It all felt unreal. Then he saw Clara, stirring awake, and remembered everything. Morning, she said quietly, her voice still rough from sleep. He nodded, rubbing his eyes. Morning, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am, she said with a faint smile. Makes me sound old. He chuckled, looking around. You sure did save our lives. Clara stood slowly, her knees stiff. We saved each other, I think. She shuffled into the kitchen, started the old gas stove, and poured 2 cups of instant coffee. Sugar's on the table, she said. Cream, too, if you can find it behind all that clutter. Cole followed her, still limping from the night before. He scanned the walls. Photos of family, most faded, some cracked. One photo caught his eye. A younger Clara with a man in uniform and a little boy between them, all smiling under a maple tree. He pointed. Your family? She nodded without turning. That's Harold, my husband, and Marcus, my boy. Her voice softened, almost vanished on that last word. Cole hesitated. You still see him? Clara poured the coffee slowly. Haven't in 6 years. Addiction's a cruel thief. It takes the person you love and leaves their shadow behind. She carried the cups to the table, setting one in front of him. I keep the door unlocked every morning, just in case he decides to walk through again. Cole looked down at his hands. I get that. He took a sip, grimacing. Strong coffee. Clara smirked. It's the only kind that works at my age. They both laughed, a short, surprising sound that filled the kitchen with something human again. When Eli woke up, the laughter drew him in. He blinked at the sight of sunlight and two faces smiling back at him. Hey, buddy, Cole said softly, kneeling beside him. You scared me half to death last night. Eli rubbed his eyes. I was cold. I know, Cole whispered, but you're safe now. You're okay. Clara knelt too, offering him a warm piece of toast. Eat this, sweetheart. It'll make you strong. The boy took it shyly, glancing between his father and the kind woman he didn't know, but somehow trusted. Later that morning, Clara showed Cole how to fix her broken back door. He found her old toolbox, hands moving with confidence and purpose, tightening hinges, replacing screws, reattaching the latch. When the door finally closed without squeaking, Clara clapped softly. You might just earn your breakfast after all. He smiled, wiping dust from his hands. Ma'am, sorry, Clara. I used to fix cars. Guess old habits don't die easy. Good thing, she said. This house needs a man who knows his way around a wrench. They spent the rest of the morning working together. He shoveled the porch, cleared snow from her steps. She cooked soup on the stove, humming gospel tunes she hadn't sung in years. Every time she looked at him holding his son, something warm fluttered inside her chest. A small, quiet joy that didn't ask for permission to exist. By noon, the world outside was bright and calm. Cole stepped out to the porch, staring across the endless field of white. I used to think people were done with kindness, he said softly, that nobody helped anyone anymore. Guess I was wrong. Clara joined him, her shawl wrapped tight. You weren't wrong, she said. People just forget until someone reminds them. He turned to her, eyes serious. You reminded me. For a long moment, they stood there. A weathered nurse and a broken biker, watching the snow glitter like forgiveness. Inside, Eli played with a small wooden train Clara had kept from her son's childhood. The sound of wheels rolling on the floorboards echoed softly through the house. Cole smiled faintly. He likes it here. He hasn't laughed like that since. He stopped himself, swallowing hard. Clara touched his arm gently. Then let him laugh. Let the house remember what that sounds like. He looked at her, voice trembling. I don't know how to repay you. She shook her head. You already did. He frowned. How? You reminded me I'm not waiting for a ghost. I'm still here, still needed. Her words hung in the air, simple, heavy, and true. The three of them ate lunch together by the window, steam rising from their bowls of soup. The conversation drifted between small talk and silence, both comfortable in its own way. Eli pointed outside suddenly. Look, it's the sun! And there it was, breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, turning the snow into gold. Cole smiled. Guess the worst is over. But Clara knew better. She had lived long enough to understand that storms don't always end when the snow stops falling. Sometimes, they keep brewing in the hearts of others, waiting to find you again. She looked out across the empty road that led to town, her gut tightening with unease. Kindness had opened her door last night, but kindness, in a place like Maple Haven, was not always welcome. By the end of the week, the snow had melted, but the cold never left. It simply changed form, from wind and ice into whispers and stares. At first, Clara Jefferson didn't notice. She was too busy caring for little Eli, making oatmeal in the mornings, teaching him how to fold napkins like soldiers standing straight, as she called it. Cole helped her patch the roof, fix the furnace, and repair the old fence Harold had built decades ago. For a few brief days, it felt as if life had quietly returned, fragile but real. Then came the looks. The mailman, usually cheerful, avoided her porch entirely, tossing letters into the snow. At the grocery store, conversations stopped the moment she walked in. Even the pastor, Reverend Clyde, didn't return her Sunday calls. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. A plain white envelope slid under the door. Inside, written in neat block letters, "We saw who you let in. Shame on you." Clara read it twice before folding it carefully and placing it in the drawer by her Bible. She said nothing to Cole, but the next day she found another, and another. By Friday, 5 envelopes sat in that drawer, each colder than the last. Old women shouldn't keep strange men. He's one of them. People talk, Clara. Think about your reputation. Her reputation. That word stung worse than frostbite. When she finally told Cole, he went still, his jaw tightening. "They're just cowards," he muttered. "Every town's got a few." Clara sighed. "This isn't the city, Cole. Folks here remember everything, and they never forget what scares them." He stood and pulled on his jacket. "Then I'll leave." She looked up sharply. "And go where?" "Anywhere else," he said. "I won't let them treat you like this." Clara shook her head. "Running won't fix it, and I don't run from storms." She smiled faintly. "I've lived through worse." Cole lowered his gaze. He wanted to believe her, but the tension in town was growing faster than the snow had fallen. That Sunday, she went to church. Alone. The sanctuary, once warm and familiar, now felt hollow. People nodded politely, but didn't meet her eyes. When she sat down, the couple beside her shifted away, sliding down the pew. She could hear the whispers behind her. "She's lost it. Poor thing. She doesn't know who she's housing." During the sermon, Reverend Clyde preached about guarding your home from wolves in sheep's clothing. He never said her name, but he didn't have to. Clara sat perfectly still, her hands clasped, her heart sinking lower with each word. After the service, she approached him quietly at the door. "Reverend," she said, "I'd like to speak with you." He glanced at the line of parishioners waiting behind her, then smiled stiffly. "Perhaps another time, Sister Jefferson." She nodded. "Of course." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. That evening, when she returned home, she found the words "Biker Lover" spray-painted across her porch in red. The paint dripped like blood against the pale wood. Her chest tightened, breath coming fast. She dropped her groceries and grabbed a rag, scrubbing until her fingers burned. Cole rushed out when he heard the noise. "Who did this?" She didn't answer. She just kept scrubbing. "Clara," he said gently, "stop." Her hands were raw. "If I stop," she whispered, "they win." Cole stood there for a moment, torn between anger and guilt. Then he knelt beside her, took the rag from her hand, and helped scrub in silence. When the last trace of paint faded, Clara sank back on her heels, exhausted. "I used to think this town was kind," she said softly. "But maybe it was just quiet." Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll protect you. I promise." She looked up at him, eyes wet but steady. "That's not your job, Cole. You've already got a son to protect. Let me fight my own battle. He shook his head. You shouldn't have to fight alone. That night, she couldn't sleep. The house that had once felt safe now echoed with every creak, every gust of wind. The faint hum of the furnace was no comfort. She sat by the window, watching the empty road. At some point, she saw headlights in the distance, a car slowing near her driveway. Her pulse quickened, but the car didn't stop. It just lingered long enough for her to see the silhouette of a man at the wheel, and then it drove off. The next morning, she found another note. This one was different. Handwritten in shaky script. He'll bring trouble. Send them away before it's too late. For the first time, fear truly settled in. She hid the letter, made breakfast, smiled for Eli, and pretended everything was fine. But deep inside, something cracked. Late that afternoon, as she and Cole sat by the window, the sound of a truck engine approached. Slow, familiar. Clara's hands tightened on her cup. "Who's that?" Cole asked. She didn't answer, because she already knew the shape of that pickup, the dent on the bumper, the sound of its brakes. Her son, Marcus, the son she hadn't seen in 6 years, the one she still left the door unlocked for. He stepped out of the truck, taller but thinner, his clothes loose, eyes sunken. And though the sight of him should have been joy, Clara felt her stomach twist, because she knew that when Marcus came home, it was never for love. When Marcus Jefferson stepped out of that rusty blue pickup, the past came walking with him. Not the kind of past that warms your heart, but the kind that sits heavy in your chest. The kind you spend years trying to forgive and never quite can. Clara stood frozen at the window, the coffee cup trembling in her hand. Cole turned to her. "You okay?" She forced a breath. "That's my son." Cole blinked. "The one you said—" "Yes," she interrupted softly. "The one who left." The door creaked open before she could move. Marcus stepped in, tracking mud across the floor like he owned the place. His eyes, tired, glassy, but sharp, swept the room. They landed on Cole and lingered. "So, this is what you've been doing," Marcus said, voice thick with accusation. "Taking in bikers now?" Clara's lips parted. "Marcus, please, don't start like this." But it was too late. His voice carried years of resentment. "You didn't answer my calls, Mom. Not once. But I come home and there's a stranger in our house? What is this?" Eli peeked out from behind the couch, clutching his toy train. Clara moved quickly, putting herself between Marcus and the boy. "He's just a child. He was freezing when they came." Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You're still saving strays, huh?" Cole stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Watch your tone." Marcus turned, sizing him up. Tattoos, leather jacket, heavy boots. "So this is what replaced me," he said coldly. Some ex-con charity case with a sob story. "Enough!" Clara's voice cracked like thunder. The sound startled even her. "You don't talk to me or anyone else in my house that way." Marcus stared at her, hurt, angry, hollow. Then his expression shifted. He spotted the jar on the counter, her emergency fund, loose bills folded tight. "Where's the rest?" he asked flatly. Clara stiffened. "The rest of what?" "The money, Mom. You got a pension, right? Savings, Harold's insurance. I need help." "Marcus," she said softly, "you've said that before." "This time it's different," he muttered, pacing the room. "I'm in a hole. I owe people. Real people." "Real people?" Cole echoed, stepping closer. "Or the kind who'd leave you in a ditch if you can't pay." Marcus glared. Stay out of this. Cole didn't move. Then stop yelling at your mother. That did it. Marcus shoved him. Cole didn't shove back. He just stood there, towering but composed. Go ahead, Cole said quietly. Take it out on me, but I promise you, hurting her won't fix anything. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then Marcus turned away, fists clenched, jaw tight. He grabbed the jar, twisting off the lid. Clara's heart dropped. Marcus, don't, she whispered. He hesitated for half a second, then stuffed the cash into his pocket. That's it, he barked. All those years you preached about saving, and this is all you've got? Tara appeared in the doorway. A thin young woman in a denim jacket, hair unwashed, eyes darting nervously. Come on, babe, she said, glancing at Cole. Let's just go. Marcus ignored her. His eyes moved to the framed picture on the wall, the one of Harold in uniform, holding toddler Marcus on his shoulders. He snatched it down and threw it to the floor. The glass shattered. Stop it, Clara cried. Stop what? He shouted. Pretending we're still a family? Pretending you care? Eli whimpered from the couch, and that sound, that tiny frightened sound, was what finally broke Clara. She stepped forward, tears in her eyes, voice trembling but strong. Marcus Jefferson, she said, I have spent every night praying that you'd come home. I opened my door, my arms, my heart, but you didn't come for forgiveness. You came for money. He looked at her, chest heaving. Because that's all I've got left, he said quietly. Money's all anyone listens to. She shook her head. Then you haven't been listening to the right people. Silence filled the room, heavy and painful. Tara tugged at his sleeve. Let's go, Marcus. He hesitated, then he picked up the last $20 bill from the counter and slipped it into his pocket. As he reached the door, he turned one last time. You love Dad more than me, he spat. And then he was gone. The sound of the truck engine faded into the distance. Clara stood there, trembling. The air felt heavier than the storm that had passed a week ago. She sank into the chair by the window, covering her face. Her breath came in broken waves. Cole knelt beside her, his hand hovering but not touching. I'm sorry, he whispered. She shook her head slowly. Don't be. That wasn't your fault. Her voice cracked again. It's mine. I raised him to believe love would always clean up his mess. But I never taught him that love has limits. Eli crawled onto her lap, holding out his toy train. Don't cry, he said softly. Clara smiled through tears. Oh, sweetheart, you're too young to understand how much this hurts. Cole exhaled, glancing toward the window where tire tracks cut through the snow. He'll come around, he said. Someday. Clara looked out at the road. If he does, I hope it's not to take more. I hope it's to give something back. For the first time in her life, she didn't pray for her son's return. She prayed for his awakening. That night, she packed away the broken photo, swept up the glass, and locked the door. Not because she stopped believing in kindness, but because she finally understood that kindness without boundaries is another kind of suffering. She didn't know it yet, but by locking that door, she had opened another, one that would lead to the most unexpected redemption of all. The next morning, the air was still. Not peaceful still, empty still. The kind of silence that comes after too much shouting when words have cut deep enough to leave echoes. Clara Jefferson moved through her little house as if walking through the ruins of her own heart. The picture frames were gone from the mantel. The floor still held faint scars from the night before, a scratch from Marcus's boots, a crack in the tile from where the jar had fallen. Cole sat quietly at the kitchen table, his son Eli beside him, drawing on a piece of scrap paper with a dull pencil. The child's laughter had faded too. He drew in silence now, glancing up at Clara from time to time. "You don't have to clean all that up right now," Cole said softly. "I do," she answered, her voice steady but brittle. "If I stop moving, I'll start remembering." He nodded slowly. He understood that kind of pain, the kind that makes standing still unbearable. She opened the back door, stepping out into the cold morning air. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that feels too honest. Her hands trembled as she hung a sheet on the line, though she didn't need to. The motion was simply something to hold on to. Behind her, Cole spoke again. "You want me to fix that window he broke?" "Not yet," she said. "Let it breathe for a while." He looked at her, puzzled, but said nothing. The day crawled by. Eli napped. Cole worked on the truck. Clara cooked dinner she couldn't eat. When night fell, the world outside turned quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that felt safe anymore. Then just before dawn, the sound came, a distant rumble, faint at first, then louder, steady, rhythmic, like thunder rolling low across the earth. Cole froze mid-step. He knew that sound. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Clara stepped onto the porch, squinting toward the road. The horizon shimmered, dust rising behind a wave of chrome and steel. The sound grew louder, filling the valley until even the windows rattled. Eli stirred awake inside, clutching his blanket. "Daddy?" "It's okay, bud," Cole said quickly, though his own pulse had begun to race. Moments later, the first bike turned into the driveway, a massive Harley with black paint and a silver skull emblem glinting in the morning light. Behind it came another, and another, and another. By the time the engines cut off, nearly 50 riders stood outside the old farmhouse. Clara gripped the porch rail, stunned. "Cole, what is this?" He took a deep breath. They're my brothers." The lead rider removed his helmet, a gray-bearded man with a face carved from years of wind and road. Hank Steele Donovan, president of the Iron Vultures. He stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. "Ma'am," he said, voice deep and steady, "you don't know me, but I know what you did." Clara blinked, still unsure what was happening. "What I did?" Hank nodded. "You opened your door. That's not something people do anymore. Not for men like us." Cole stepped down from the porch, meeting him halfway. "I didn't call them," he said quietly. "I know," Hank replied. "Word travels, brother. When one of ours goes down, we don't forget who lifted him back up." He turned toward the house. "You mind if we come in, ma'am?" Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "As long as you wipe your boots." That made the men laugh. A low, respectful laugh that filled the cold air with something warm. Within minutes, they were working. Not talking, not asking, just doing. One patched the broken window. Another replaced the door hinges. A pair of them repainted the porch where the cruel words had once been scrawled. Eli stood at the window, wide-eyed, watching the army of bikers transform his new home. "Why are they helping us?" he whispered. Clara smiled faintly, because good hearts wear all kinds of jackets. By noon, the house looked new again, brighter, stronger, alive. The sound of hammers and drills faded into laughter and stories from the road. Finally, Hank approached Clara, holding a small black box. Inside was a leather patch, embroidered in silver thread. He handed it to her gently. Honorary vulture, he said, reading the words aloud. You earned this. Clara looked at it, touched and speechless. I don't belong to your club. Hank smiled. You do now. You showed us what loyalty looks like when it's cold and dark. You reminded us why we ride together. Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. You deserve it, Clara. No, she whispered. I don't deserve anything. I just did what any mother would do. Hank shook his head. That's the problem. Not enough mothers like you left in this world. The men stood in silence for a moment, hats in hand, the kind of silence that carries respect. Then Hank nodded toward the end of the driveway, where the faint tire tracks from Marcus's truck still scarred the snow. Word is, your boy's in trouble, he said. You want us to find him? Clara's lips parted. Shock, pain, hesitation. Then she shook her head. No, not yet. Some roads a man's got to walk alone. Hank nodded once. Fair enough. Before they left, the riders gathered in a line, engines roaring once more. Not in defiance this time, but in salute. They raised their hands, 2 fingers to the sky, the biker's sign of respect. Eli clapped his hands, laughing as the engines thundered down the road, leaving trails of dust and sunlight behind. When it was quiet again, Cole turned to her. You see, Clara? You didn't just save one life. You reminded 50 men they still had souls. Clara looked at the fresh paint on her porch, the unbroken window, the warmth in her home, and smiled through tears. I didn't remind them, she said softly. They reminded me. But deep down, she knew one thing remained unfinished. Because while forgiveness had come riding down her driveway on 200 wheels of redemption, one person she loved was still lost out there, walking a road colder than any winter storm. 3 weeks passed. Snow turned to slush, and slush gave way to mud. The fields around Maple Haven began to breathe again, brown earth peeking through where white had ruled for months. Inside the Jefferson farmhouse, spring sunlight poured through clean windows. Cole was repairing the back fence while Eli chased a butterfly across the yard, laughter ringing through the air like wind chimes. And for the first time in years, Clara Jefferson felt something that resembled peace. The town had changed. Neighbors who once whispered now waved from their porches. Children came by with cookies for Miss Clara. Someone even left tulips on her doorstep. No note, just flowers. Redemption had rolled into Maple Haven on motorcycles and somehow stayed. But one night, as the last pink light faded behind the hills, Clara sat at her kitchen table, staring at a single unopened envelope. It had no return address, just her name written in her son's messy handwriting. Her heart squeezed as she traced the letters. Marcus. She unfolded the paper. Mom, I'm sorry. I messed up. I don't deserve to come home, but I need help. I'm at the motel outside town. I don't know where else to go. Her hand trembled as she read it again. Cole noticed the look on her face when he came in. Bad news? He asked quietly. She hesitated, then passed him the letter. He read it, eyes narrowing slightly. Do you want me to go with you? No, she said after a moment. If he's reaching out, it has to be me. Cole nodded slowly. Then I'll keep the coffee warm. The drive to the old motel felt longer than it should have. Every telephone pole, every mile of cracked asphalt carried a memory. When she pulled into the parking lot, the flickering neon sign read, VAC NCY. Half the letters were gone, like the place itself was trying to disappear. Room 7. She found it easily, the only door with light leaking from beneath. She knocked once. The door opened a crack. Marcus stood there, thinner than she remembered, with stubble on his chin and dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else too, a faint clarity in his gaze that hadn't been there before. "Mom," he whispered. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. No shouting, no blame. Just two people carrying the weight of everything unsaid. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. He stepped aside. The room smelled of cigarettes and cheap soap. A half-packed duffel bag sat on the bed. On the nightstand was a pamphlet from a rehabilitation center in Milwaukee. Clara's heart ached. "You went?" He nodded. 90 days. No booze, no pills, just meetings, work, and a lot of silence. She smiled faintly. Silence can be good. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. "I thought about what you said," he murmured. "About love having limits. You were right. But I didn't come back for money, Mom. I came back because I finally want to earn it." Tears blurred her vision. She sat beside him, reaching for his hand. It was rough, scarred, but steady. "You don't have to earn love," she said. "You just have to keep it this time." He swallowed hard. "I want to try. I'm working at a garage out by the highway. The owner's giving me a second chance." Said I reminded him of his own kid. Clara smiled through tears. "That's good, Marcus. That's real good." He looked at her, voice trembling. "I broke so much, Mom. I hurt you. I took from you." "Yes," she said gently. "But now you're giving something back. Your effort, your honesty. That's worth more than money ever was." He exhaled, eyes glistening. "You really forgive me?" "I already did," she whispered. "A long time ago. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself." For the first time in years, Marcus smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes. When they stood, she hugged him tight, feeling the familiar weight of his head on her shoulder, like when he was a boy. He smelled of motor oil and rain. "I'll do better," he said against her hair. "I know you will." They walked outside together, the night air crisp and cool. In the distance, the faint sound of engines echoed, not loud, but steady, like a heartbeat across the hills. "The bikers?" Marcus asked. Clara nodded. "They check in sometimes. Cole makes sure the house stays fixed. Eli calls me Miss Clara." Marcus smiled softly. "You got yourself a family while I was gone." She shook her head. "No, Marcus. I just remembered what one feels like." He looked down at the ground, kicking a pebble with his boot. "Can I come home?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, not out of anger, but love that had learned boundaries. "You can visit," she said. "But if you come home, it has to be because you're ready to live there, not hide." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I'll come back when I'm ready to build, not borrow," he said. Clara smiled. "That's my boy." As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Mom!" She looked back. He held up the rehab pamphlet. "I'm keeping this, just in case I ever forget who I was." Her eyes softened. "Then you're already halfway home." When Clara drove back through Maple Haven, dawn was just breaking. The sky glowed gold over the horizon, and mist curled low over the fields. Cole was waiting on the porch when she pulled up. He didn't ask what happened. He could read the peace in her eyes. "He's alive," she said simply. Cole nodded. "Then that's enough for tonight." As she stepped inside, the morning sun filled the kitchen. Warm, bright, forgiving. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to leave the door unlocked, because the one who once walked away had finally found his way back. 90 days later, Maple Haven didn't look like the same town anymore. The snow was gone, the fields were green again, and wildflowers bloomed along the fences where paint had once peeled. Even the air felt lighter, the kind of spring air that carries second chances. Clara Jefferson stood on her porch with a basket of laundry, squinting at the rising sun. Birds were chirping on the wire. The sky was soft blue. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, Harold would have liked this day. From the road came the steady growl of an engine, not one, but two. Moments later, Cole's old pickup rolled into the yard, dust swirling behind it. He climbed out, grinning, with Eli in the passenger seat, waving a small cardboard sign that read, Miss Clara's Sunday Supper. Clara laughed, a warm, surprised sound. You two are trouble, she said, waving them inside. The kitchen soon filled with the smell of baked cornbread and laughter. Eli sat at the table coloring, while Cole stirred chili on the stove. The walls, freshly painted by the bikers months earlier, reflected sunlight like hope. Cole looked around and smiled. This place feels alive now. Clara nodded. It's been alive ever since you two showed up at my door. He chuckled. Careful, Clara. Keep saying things like that, and people will think you actually like us. She gave him a look over her glasses. Who says I don't? Eli giggled, kicking his legs under the table. Miss Clara likes everybody. Not everybody, she corrected, smiling softly. Just the ones who remind me that good hearts come in all shapes and sizes. As they ate, the phone rang. The old rotary phone on the wall, its ring sharp and sudden. Clara froze, spoon midair. Hardly anyone called her anymore. She stood and lifted the receiver. Hello? There was silence for a moment. Then a familiar voice, steady but hesitant. Mom, it's me. Her hand trembled slightly. Marcus? Yeah, he said, his voice clearer than she remembered. I just wanted you to know. Today's my 90th day sober. Clara closed her eyes. Oh, Marcus. I got my 1-day chip, my 30-day chip, and now this one. I keep them all in my wallet. My boss says I'm up for a promotion. Said I earned it. Tears filled her eyes, rolling down her cheeks before she could stop them. I'm proud of you, son. More than you know. Thanks, Mom. I don't want to mess it up this time. You won't, she said softly. You already turned the corner. Tell that man Cole thanks again, Marcus said. He dropped by the garage last week. Left a tool set for me. Said every man deserves a clean start. Clara smiled through her tears. I'll tell him. Before hanging up, Marcus added, Oh, and Mom, I found a church out here. They're good people. I even started singing again. Guess the apple didn't fall too far from you. That made her laugh, a sound that carried through the house. I'll see you soon, Marcus. Yeah, he said quietly. You will. When she hung up, Cole was watching her, smiling knowingly. Good news? He asked. Clara wiped her eyes and nodded. The best kind. He's finding his way. Eli looked up. Is Marcus your son? She knelt beside him, touching his cheek. He is, sweetheart. And just like you, he's learning how to be brave. Eli nodded thoughtfully. My daddy says brave means trying again, even when it's hard. Clara smiled. Your daddy's right. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, glowing against the framed patch on the wall. Honorary Vulture, Heart of Maple Haven. Below it, hung a photo the bikers had sent her, the crew standing together under a banner that read, "Kindness has no uniform." Cole followed her gaze. You ever think about what all this means? That one night, one open door, changed everything. She nodded slowly. Sometimes I think about it too much, but maybe that's the point. We're supposed to remember, so we keep doing it again. He looked down, thoughtful. You know, Hank's planning a ride next month. Wants to dedicate it to you. To me? She said, startled. Yep. The Maple Haven ride for Mercy. They're raising money for the shelter in town. Clara shook her head, half laughing, half crying. Oh, Lord. Those men barely make it on gas money. And now, they're saving the world. Cole grinned. Guess you rubbed off on them. As the day faded, they moved to the porch. Eli curled up in a blanket, humming softly, while Cole tuned the old radio. The air smelled like lilac and freshly cut grass. Clara leaned back in her chair, the wooden boards creaking beneath her. You know, Cole, she said quietly, I used to think I was just waiting for life to end, like everything good had already happened. But I was wrong. Sometimes the last chapter is where the story finally starts making sense. He looked at her with quiet respect. I think that's true for all of us. She turned her eyes toward the horizon, where the sun was dipping low, painting everything gold. You ever wonder why people show up at just the right time? He smiled faintly. I stopped wondering. I just started saying thank you. Clara nodded, whispering, then thank you. The radio played softly, an old gospel tune about home and redemption. Eli drifted to sleep. Cole leaned against the post, and Clara, surrounded by warmth and quiet, let the peace of 90 days settle deep into her bones. Because forgiveness wasn't a finish line, it was a garden. And at last, hers had begun to bloom. The morning after that peaceful Sunday felt different, not because anything had changed, but because everything had settled. The sky over Maple Haven glowed pale gold, and a quiet breeze brushed the porch where Clara Jefferson sat with her cup of tea. The world around her seemed to exhale. The last 3 months, the storm, the strangers, the heartbreak, the forgiveness, all of it now lived in the soft hum of spring. She watched as Cole loaded the truck for his next trip to the garage. Eli ran in circles chasing a butterfly, his laughter floating through the air. And for a long moment, Clara simply closed her eyes and listened. Not to words, not to noise, but to life. When Cole came up the steps, wiping grease from his hands, she looked at him and said, "Funny thing, isn't it?" "What's that?" he asked. "How one knock at 2 in the morning can change the rest of your days." He smiled softly. "You still think about that night?" "Every time I hear the wind," she said. "Every time I look at that door." Her gaze drifted toward it, the same front door that had once stood between fear and faith, between life and death. It had been repainted since then, clean, white, and shining under the morning light. But she still remembered the moment her hand turned the knob, the candlelight flickering behind her, and a father's desperate voice on the other side. Cole followed her eyes. "You could have closed it, you know. No one would have blamed you." Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I would have blamed myself." She took a slow sip of her tea. "I think about all the doors I've closed in my life. Some because I was scared. Some because I thought I was protecting myself. And some because I thought I was too old to matter anymore. But that night, that knock reminded me I was still needed. Cole leaned against the railing. "You gave me my life back, Clara." She looked up at him, smiling softly. "And you gave me mine. We just traded miracles." They both laughed, a quiet, content kind of laugh. Eli ran up to the porch holding a flower, a small, crushed dandelion. He handed it to her proudly. "For you, Miss Clara." She took it carefully, as if it were gold. "Why, thank you, sweetheart." He looked at the door. "Daddy says you saved us." She tilted her head, her eyes kind. "No, honey, I just opened the door." The boy frowned. "But you didn't know who we were." "That's the trick," she said gently. "You never do. That's what makes kindness real." Cole smiled, shaking his head. "You should be the one preaching at church, not Reverend Clyde." Clara chuckled. "I doubt he'd like my sermons. I'd tell folks that being good isn't about singing louder or dressing proper. It's about seeing someone who's fallen and deciding not to step over them." Her voice grew softer, more reflective. "We spend so much time locking our doors, Cole, to our homes, our hearts, our second chances. But sometimes, the very thing we're afraid of is what God sends to heal us." Cole nodded quietly, looking out at the fields. "That's truth." For a while, they sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. A mail truck rolled up, and the driver waved. "Morning, Miss Jefferson." She waved back. "Morning, Pete." He handed her an envelope, thick, white, and official looking. The return address made her eyes widen. It was from the Iron Vultures Foundation. She tore it open. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The letter read, "Dear Miss Jefferson, this year, our Brotherhood raised over $48,000 in donations for the Maple Haven shelter. We named the kitchen Clara's Table because it was your table that reminded us all what family feels like. Ride safe, live kind. Hank Steele, Donovan." Clara covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. The photo showed the bikers lined up in front of the shelter, holding a banner that read, "One open door can save 100 lives." She handed the letter to Cole, who read it and whistled softly. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "They really did it." She smiled through tears. They did more than that. They proved that goodness can wear leather and ride a Harley. Cole laughed. "You're going to make the front page again, Clara." She waved her hand. "Let them write what they want. I don't need headlines. I just need to know it mattered." She stood, walking to the door, running her fingers across the smooth white wood. It gleamed in the sunlight, quiet, humble, whole. "You know," she said, her voice steady. "People think miracles come in fire or thunder. But most of the time, they come in whispers or in a knock that nobody answers." Cole smiled faintly. "You should tell that to Marcus when he visits next." Her eyes softened. "I plan to. He's earned his peace." She turned back toward him, the morning light haloing her figure. "If this world's going to change, Cole, it won't be because of big speeches or big money. It'll change when ordinary people start opening ordinary doors." He nodded. "Starting with yours." She grinned. "Mine just happened to be first." The camera of life seemed to pull back then. A wide, cinematic shot of the house, the porch, the field, and the winding road that led away from it all. Eli laughed somewhere off screen. The wind rustled the trees. A narrator's voice might have said, "She didn't run a company. She didn't wear a suit. But that winter, Clara Jefferson became something rarer, an undercover boss of the human heart. Because compassion doesn't need a title, just an open door. As the music swells, soft piano over the sound of wind, the scene fades into sunlight spilling across the door. A final line appears on screen. Real power isn't money, it's mercy. Then fade to black. 6 months later, the doorbell rang again. Clara Jefferson was in her garden, pruning the rosebush that had survived more winters than she could count. The flowers bloomed early this year, deep red, fragrant, alive. When the bell rang, she straightened slowly, wiping dirt from her gloves. For a second, she froze, the sound unlocking something inside her. Another knock. Gentle this time. Familiar. She smiled, shaking her head. "Lord," she whispered. "You sure like full circles." She opened the door. There stood Marcus, her son, clean-shaven, clear-eyed, wearing a crisp work shirt with a name patch stitched over the pocket. He carried a small bouquet of daisies and a folded envelope. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. Clara didn't speak. She just pulled him into her arms, holding him long enough for all the lost years to fall away. When she finally stepped back, she said, "You smell like oil and soap. That's a better perfume than trouble." Marcus laughed softly. "Guess I learned that the hard way." He handed her the daisies. "They're not much, but they reminded me of you. Tough roots. Keep blooming even when it's cold." Clara's eyes glistened. "You're learning poetry now, too?" He grinned. "Nah. Just learning how to look at things without running from them." They sat on the porch swing, the same one Harold had built decades ago. It creaked under their weight, a sound that somehow felt like home. "I've been saving up," Marcus said, pulling out the envelope. "First paycheck since I got promoted. I wanted to pay you back for what I took." Clara shook her head. "No, baby. I don't need that money. What I needed was this." She touched his hand. "You showing up like a man who kept his promises." He looked down. "I want to help, Mom. Maybe fix the place up, get that roof redone." She smiled. "You can help by coming to dinner every Sunday. Cole and Eli will be there. They'll need a hand with dessert." Marcus chuckled. "Cole told me about his world-famous burnt pie." "Oh, don't start," she said, laughing. "He calls it smoked pastry." The laughter faded into a soft stillness, comfortable, real. Marcus looked out across the yard, where Eli was chasing a dog that had wandered in from the fields. "That kid's got energy," he said. "He's got light," Clara replied. "And light spreads if you let it." He nodded slowly. "I guess we all got some of that now." They sat there a while longer, watching the sky turn from gold to lavender. At last, Marcus said quietly, "I've been thinking about starting something. A community garage. A place where people like me can learn trades instead of just getting lost. Maybe call it the Open Door Garage." Clara's eyes filled again, but this time with joy. "Marcus, that's beautiful." He smiled shyly. "It just felt right. I want to help others the way you helped me. The way that man, Cole, helped me. Maybe the way you helped him too." She reached for his hand. "Then do it, and don't look back." He looked at her, really looked at her, and said softly, "You know, Mom, you never stopped opening doors. I just finally walked through one." Her throat tightened. She whispered, "That's all I ever wanted." A gentle breeze moved across the porch, carrying the scent of roses and the low hum of a motorcycle engine in the distance. Cole and Eli arrived minutes later, parking by the fence. Eli ran up the steps shouting, Marcus, you came back. Marcus laughed, kneeling to scoop him up. Sure did, little man. And this time, I brought tools. Cole climbed the porch, smiling. Well, would you look at this family reunion? Family? Marcus said, smiling. Yeah, I guess it is. They all sat down together around the small outdoor table. Clara poured lemonade into old mason jars, the ice clinking gently. The sun dipped behind the fields, painting everything in gold. Cole raised his glass. To second chances. Eli raised his too. And open doors, Marcus added. And to the people who believe in you when nobody else will. Clara lifted her glass last. To the ones who knock and the ones who answer. They drank, laughing, as the wind whispered through the grass and the last light of the day stretched long across the earth. When the stars appeared, Clara looked at the door one last time. It stood quiet and still, reflecting the moonlight. Not a barrier, not a memory, but a symbol. She spoke softly, more to herself than anyone else. People think miracles come in storms or in voices from heaven. But sometimes they come in the shape of a stranger, shivering on your porch. Cole heard her and nodded. Or a son finding his way back home. Marcus smiled, eyes glinting. Or a woman brave enough to open her heart when the world told her to shut it. Clara laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. Well then, I guess we've all been each other's miracle. Eli, curled up in a blanket beside her, whispered sleepily, Miss Clara, are you going to close the door tonight? She brushed his hair back gently. No, sweetheart. Some doors are meant to stay open. The camera of imagination would pull back one final time. The house glowing warmly against the dark countryside, laughter drifting into the night, the faint hum of engines echoing like a heartbeat of kindness that refused to fade. A soft narrator's voice could be heard as the image blurred into starlight. She opened her door once, on a freezing night, and the world opened back. Because mercy isn't a gesture, it's a ripple. And when one heart answers the knock of another, the sound travels farther than any storm. The music swells, gentle piano, a single violin. As the screen fades to black, text appears slowly. The story of one door, one choice, one night. If it moved you, pass it on. Because somewhere, someone is still waiting for a knock. And so, the woman who once sat alone in the cold now lives in a home filled with laughter. The biker she saved rebuilt his life. Her lost son found his way back. And a small town that once whispered turned into a place that finally listened. If you felt something watching this, that's because you were supposed to. Because this isn't just Clara's story. It's our story. It's about the doors we lock out of fear, the people we misjudge, and the truth that mercy costs nothing, yet changes everything. Maybe you've been the one knocking, desperate for help. Maybe you've been the one too afraid to open the door. Either way, tonight, you know which choice matters most. Remember, you don't need to wear a suit or sit in an office to change lives. You can be the undercover boss of your own heart, the one who leads with compassion when no one's watching. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Because kindness is contagious, and someone out there is still waiting, right now, for a knock that will change everything. We'll keep telling stories that restore faith, heal wounds, and remind the world that empathy is power. This channel, Celebrity Undercover Stories, exists for one reason: to prove that love, courage, and forgiveness are stronger than hate. Before you go, take a moment. Look at your own door. What would happen if you opened it? Who might walk in? Who might you become? Thank you for watching. Stay human, stay kind, and keep your door open.